Understanding the composition in art is as important as understanding the lineal perspective in drawing and as important as a real perspective in watercolors. These notions are very important for any artist who wants to start with the drawing, the painting, and whatever medium that you wish. In this video, I will share you different notions about the composition in art and why some of the marvelous masterpieces that you all know became so famous due only to one factor, as it is composition in art. For those of you who are for the first time here, my name is Alla. I'm a sketch illustrator and watercolorist, and from 2020 I'm an art teacher too. So let's proceed with the composition in art notions. The first topic that I would want to talk is about the golden ratio, or how it is mostly well known, it is Fibonacci code. If you remember the mathematics, Fibonacci code is coming 1, 2, the third number is the sum of the first two, the next number is the last two, so it will be 5, 8, 5 plus 8 is 13, 13 plus 8 is 21. It is a Fibonacci code. And how mathematics is related to composition in a way, or how we apply this knowledge in our painting. For example, we have a certain point over here, going a little bit. So the sum over here, we see that Fibonacci code, we have one side, here we have 2, here we have 3. So every time we go over here, it will come up the Fibonacci code. Here will be 5, and it is called the golden ratio. It is a little bit complicated to understand when we talk about it, but that you can understand it easier. It is a mathematical ratio that commonly found in nature, and it is used to yield pleasing, harmonious proportions within a painting. For example, if we are looking at Mona Lisa of Leonardo da Vinci, we will see the same Fibonacci number on this work. For example, if we are working with a composition of the portrait, how we use this Fibonacci code over here. I hope you see it well. Okay, I will imagine that this is my piece of paper, and when we position the face or the head of a person, we usually create the oval over here, and 2/3 of the face will be at the top, from the center up to the top. And if we calculate this, here we will have the same Fibonacci number. We will have the ratio 1, and here we will have 2. And if considered to the proportions to the whole paper, it will be the same proportions. This is the reason of creating the code Fibonacci. Or for example, if we are drawing a simple star, if we will draw it better in this way, we will have the same things, the same points, that this part is the Fibonacci number 2. So we have here the same Fibonacci, over here we have the same Fibonacci, over here, and it is repeating in many ways. And if we are drawing the leaf usually it has the same Fibonacci number. You see? So the same Fibonacci number we have over here. It is most commonly known as the golden ratio. As far as you understand, a great composition within the most well-known artist is not just happening by accident. It requires a lot of thought, planning, and patience, and as well the familiarity with the visual elements. Let's proceed with another rule that usually it is used already in landscapes. It is called rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a useful guideline used by many professional photographers. Here we have a paper, right? So this paper, we are dividing it in canvas into 9 canvas that will be equal by form. As you can see, we have 9 equal parts, and the position of the most important elements in this scene along these lines are the points where they intersect. For example, if you want to create a landscape composition, you have to follow these steps. You have to take care all over the time of these 4 points of reference. If you, for example, want to create a landscape and you want to paint a horizontal line, or you paint it over here at the top, and you can paint, for example, a river or a path, you will take the reference as well from this point. And to create it interesting. Here we have horizontal line, and here we have the clouds. We have the same points of reference. We can take the horizontal line over here and to paint it here, and here we can have a tree on this point, as you can see. Here we can have a house, for example, this point, and here we can paint the clouds. So it depends if we want to create visually a more pleasant way, or we want to focalize our view to this part of the painting or to the clouds. If you want, you can draw here the people that will be focalized straight away on these points. Another rule that it is very well known within the artists is the rule of odds. The rule of odds suggests that an odd number of subjects in an image is more interesting than an even number. An even number of subjects produces symmetries in the image, which can appear overly formal and unnatural. An image of a person surrounded, framed by 2 other persons, for instance, where the person in the center is the object of interest in that artwork, is more likely to be perceived as friendly and comforting by the viewer than an image of a single person with no significant surroundings. You have to create as well a movement, because if a composition is stagnant, it may be boring. And by creating a movement in the composition and use it to guide your viewer's eye around the composition, it creates more interest. Don't cut it and to avoid bisecting your composition, for example, with the horizon. It is really important that the horizon is not a line straight in the middle. It has to be somewhere or below or behind, and you don't have to make it straight in the middle. And don't forget that people love triangles. Triangular compositions are thought to be more aesthetically pleasing, and this is similar to the rule of odds. And general composition tips are that it should be a center of interest or focus in the work to prevent it from becoming a pattern in itself. You should try to direct the viewer's eyes all around the painting. You have to try to avoid leading the viewer's eyes on the picture immediately, with subjects facing out of the image. Understanding a composition is a fundamental part of being an artist, and no matter which medium you practice, it is the ability that you create your own story using the visual elements. I believe you should think of composition not as a set up of strict rules, but as a general mindset when creating your artwork. Before we go to these examples and which one is a correct one and which one is not, I want to explain you some very important thing about still life. When we are drawing a still life, here I will have a vertical way to present the still life. For example, we have a cube, a sphere, and we have a triangle, right? We have to consider not only how to put all these objects into the paper, but as well we have to consider that these objects have to stay on a surface. We don't have to forget that this usually stays on a surface and it has to be presented, and the background. So we have to explain not only the whole still life, but as well where it is positioned. If it is on the place, it is not floating or in the painting or in the work. Very important thing about still life as well, if we are drawing more than one object, we don't have to consider that each object is a small piece of the work. We have to consider first the composition as a whole. So we have to consider all these objects as one geometrical form when we decide to draw it. We don't figure out each and every one object. We decided it as a whole and where it is positioned on the paper. Now let's move on with these different examples. Very important when we start to create a composition, and specifically with still life, we don't have to create the objects too small and to have too much space like on the background and on the surface. Really important in this case, this work won't be interesting enough as the objects are too small on a huge piece of paper. It is not a correct way to present a still life. Then, if the objects are not entering into the surface or are too big, in this way, as you can see, the sphere is coming up in a good size, more or less, but the triangle or the form that we'll have here like a triangle, it is cut on this paper, and this makes that the painting is not correctly created. The composition is wrong. So in this example, you see that the objects are not small enough, neither big enough like in this work, and the position is really interesting. We see the surface, we see the background, and this composition will be more likely to be interesting. And it is as well in the center of the work. Then, when we are positioning this work, for example, we have the background and the surface really up and the objects closer to us. In this way, this composition is not pleasant to our eyes. And we will try to avoid this kind of composition. The composition that is on the right side or on the left side. It does not usually have to be on the right side, but if you are painting on this, we have over here too much white space. This composition is wrong composition. And another good composition will be a vertical one, and as you can see, we have the surface well presented, the background, and the objects are not too small, not too big, and this composition will be interesting. So in still life, these two compositions are the best one. To create a specific approach and that your eye catch up a good way to learn how to create a composition in still life, I advise you to go with very famous artists, and you have to watch these works. The composition in landscape and how it is more likely to create a good composition. The first one example is not good because it is not interesting when all, for example, 3 trees have the same distance one within another. It is not looking natural, and this kind of composition we will avoid. Another composition that we will avoid, for example, even if you see in the real life there are bunches of trees, you won't paint those with the same form and the same size, and one closer to another in the center. Even if it looks like in the reality, try to avoid this kind of works. And if you want to, what you have to do is to create different size of the trees, and somewhere to leave more space, not to have the same space, to create in this way a more interesting composition. But avoid creating the same trees, the same bushes that are close one to another, and create an interesting work. Let's move on to this one example. In this example, we have only 2 trees. Even if this work is a good one if we are working with rule of odds, it's not interesting because it has the same space. But here it already applies the rules of odds. We don't paint 2 trees that are equal in form, are straight in the center. Even if this composition is exactly that you see it, try to avoid it. And the best way to create this kind of work is to add one more tree close by, or what you can do, you can add a house and to create a more interesting way of the painting of the landscape. Then this kind of work, it is not a good work, and this example, it is not a proper example because the tree is split into 2, or the trunk, it is split into 2. Try to avoid the composition when the work is split or it is cut off. If you still want to create something interesting, because a lot of artists have different landscapes with the trees that are not in all their sides, what you have to do, just try to create more than the half of the tree outside or in the landscape. For example, of here the trunk is here, but the rest of the tree, maybe the
very small part is not seen. For example, like in this way. And you have to create an interesting point. Like for example, you catch up the attention not on these trees, but you catch already the attention on this house, on this river, or on this path. And the trees are like complementary in these landscapes. In this way, this composition will be good and this one not. Another two good compositions are the composition with the bunches, just repeated over here. And instead of doing it like this, just create some more space in between some of the trees, and this composition will be a good one. When talking about the portraits, we have several examples over here, but what I want to catch up more your attention is that always when you create a composition with a portrait, you have to imagine where our head will be. For example, always the head is oval, more or less. So you have to imagine where it is the oval positioned in the paper. It is in the center, it is a little bit higher. It depends what you want to present. Sometimes a good composition, it is a good one like this, and it is not good if it is like this. For example, in this way, if we paint some background over here, maybe this composition will be a good enough, because you have some background and you are not focusing only on the face. But when you are focusing on the face, you have to create it in this way, because what we are using and we are more pleased to see is not only the face, but as well some of the shoulders and some part over here, not only the face. And this position will be a better seen in the composition. As I mentioned, this composition, depending on how your background will be, can be a good composition, but at the same time, it is not a correct composition if you want to focus the viewer's eye to the face. So it can be a good and bad at the same time composition. This one is a good composition. In this way, it can be a good composition too, only if you are looking into background, because as you can see, the head is too small, and obviously it is coming up over here, this body. And when the body is coming up as well, you have, or at least to create this triangle to form the decomposition to be interesting. For example, Mona Lisa is made in this way, and at the same time, you have some background over here. If you miss up this step that the background is done over here, and you only focus on the face and you're not painting really good the body, then this composition is not a beautiful one. If you are taking into account not only the face, but as well the body and the background, in this case, this composition will be a good one. So this composition can be a good one and a bad one, depending on how you will focus the eye of the viewer. This kind of composition or in portraits, when you are only showing up half of the face, sometimes can be interesting in photography, but we are not used to do it in portraits when we are painting it. For this reason, this kind of composition, please try to avoid. We don't have to have this kind of too much white space over here, even if you are catching up the eyes into the background. In this case is wrong, wrong, wrong. Then, when we are painting the composition that the person is watching over there or on the other side, well, sometimes we can position this part of the head and the body on a little bit right side, so not centrical oriented. We can leave here more space, because in this way we are catching up attention that this person is watching over there, and here we paint some background, or even if we are not painting the background, it is not a problem, because we're catching up and it has created a beautiful work that this person is watching for something interesting over here. The same way happens if the person is watching on the other side, and we leave more space over here. It can be centrically oriented, or it can be left on the right side. It will be, in both cases, it will be a correct composition. Then it's really important that when we split the paper, and we are not starting with details in the portrait, because we can draw the nose, the mouth, the eyes, and then we see that we don't have enough space for the whole head. In this way, it happens the same like here. We leave too much space, even if the eyes are watching into something. It is an interesting point of view. You see here we have all the head, but here we have only half of it, and we have to avoid to cut off some of the part of the composition. And the last way of composing the work, if we are drawing too small the face, if we are watching it like this, then it is not a correct composition. But in the way that we already painted the person into too small, so it is, we see more than half of the body, and the face is smaller. What we have to add over here, we can add some additional elements over here. And as well, we can create the background. And automatically, this composition is transformed from one that is not interesting into one that is really pleasant to catch our eyes. If you have any questions, please share your questions in the comments. I will be happy to answer all of your questions and to prepare some new interesting videos for you. Have a good day. Bye.